Princess Celestia the Changeling Queen, Chapter 18, Part 4.
Captain Armor, I thought that you were aware of hostile anti-changeling elements within our army. I admit the information was classified when I gave it to you, but that does not excuse this breach in security. Care to explain yourself?
Snapped Celestia. Everybody in the room stared as the irate princess chastised her captain of the guard. Shining Armor for the most part was trying not to flinch, but still had a guilty look on his face. What happened, Princess, was that I failed to cover all the risks to Queen Chrysalis and her entourage. Yes, I had protocols in place to regulate the entry of military personnel, which included a resupply schedule, military ID checks, and registration, and forced outside personnel to leave their main armaments. However, I failed to anticipate the possibility, however unlikely, that weapons or hostile personnel could be smuggled in, and was unable to provide sufficient security coverage within the base area. Shining Armor sighed, but didn't avert his gaze from either Chrysalis or Celestia. I'm sorry, Princess, Queen Chrysalis, but it was my failure that allowed the assassination attempt on Queen Chrysalis's life.
That's not true, Princess.
Eyes and heads turned to see one of the Royal Guard's ponies backed by several of his companions. Shining Armor glared at them, but the ponies refused to back down.
The procedures the captain instated would have been sufficient to catch the infiltrators, if we had followed them at all,
said the guard, averting his gaze in shame.
Several of the assassins were ponies who once served in our units, and when we recognized them and confirmed their identification papers, we waved them in, without checking the supplies that they were bringing in more stringently,
explained another guard. Celestia's eyes softened, but only for a moment, before her eyes narrowed.
I thank you for having the courage to admit your own mess, but do not assume that your honesty will leave you free from any disciplinary action.
The group of guards gulped at Celestia's statements, but nodded dutifully. Features grim, Celestia turned back at Shining Armor. To Chrysalis's admiration, the captain didn't even cringe, as the sovereign dressed him down in a tone so cold and full of biting disappointment that it would make a full-grown Minotaur cry.
Captain Armor, this debacle wasn't entirely your fault, and you did cover all the common and obvious risks.
Celestia then gestured pointedly at Chrysalis, whose right side was still bandaged from yesterday's engagements.
But on your watch, a foreign dignitary supposedly under our protection was attacked and very nearly killed. You should have anticipated every scenario, no matter how unlikely, and at least attempt to address them. Do I have to remind you the motto of the Cadrelat Royal Guard Academy?
Constant vigilance, Your Highness, said Shining Armor, his voice clipped. Chrysalis could sense the pony's guilt and shame pouring out like a waterfall, but he maintained his posture.
Good. Now I will not demote you or remove you from this conference, but consider your role as chief of this base's security at an end. I will bring in a replacement, as well as reinforcements to this base in light of the Royal Guard's failure. Perhaps General Legate Hannibal and her equestrian Foreign Legion will suffice to keep any similar incidents from happening ever again. Is that understood, Captain Armor?
Demanded Celestia. The shock and despair that spread through the faces of the Royal Guard's ponies was only matched by Chrysalis's surprise. She supposed Celestia would punish the Royal Guards for allowing the assassins to attack her, but the Queen never anticipated the extent of Celestia's wrath. She had taken deliberate steps to ensure the Royal Guards would be disgraced, and that they would remember it. The Alicorn's actions also served to crush the reminder of Chrysalis's suspicion that Celestia ordered the assassination. Yes, Your Highness, said Shining Armor, as smartly as he could, though the last part of his voice was choked as the humiliation overcame his discipline. No pony or changeling but Chrysalis and perhaps Celestia noticed this lapse in his stoicism.
As much as he screwed up Princess Celestia, I have to agree with Captain Armor's analysis of the assassins,
said Chrysalis, before she could stop herself. Shining Armor gawked at Chrysalis, which was quite unsurprising. Given the nature of the captain's past experience with Chrysalis, his reaction was copied throughout the room by various ponies and changelings alike.
I was merely expressing that the disciplined nature of the combatants my Chevaliers and I faced only confirmed the captain's findings,
said Chrysalis coolly. Despite her attempts, the end of the Queen's mouth twitched in embarrassment.
Indeed. Now, Captain Armor, we intend to interrogate some of the prisoners personally.
I suggest against that, Your Highness, interrupted Shining Armor. Celestia's eyebrows shot up, as did Chrysalis's. Neither expected the captain to cut off his sovereign. We currently have 8 prisoners in the holding cells that we awakened from your sleeping spell. Despite our attempts to interrogate them, they have remained silent. In the rare case, our prisoners just hurled insults at us. I propose we immediately transfer the prisoners to be interrogated by Reigns immediately, said Shining Armor.
Reigns?
Asked Chrysalis. The acronym seemed familiar, but not in a good way.
The Royal Equestrian Intelligence and Naval Service. What has been the nature of their insults?
Asked Celestia, forestalling Chrysalis's questioning gaze. Shining Armor glanced at Chrysalis and hesitated for a moment. Mainly, it's directed at you and your species, Queen Chrysalis. Revenge for Canterlot seems a rather common one. Chrysalis bit her lip and averted her gaze. The rest of her changeling escort swallowed awkwardly and refused to meet the eyes of the ponies in the room.
Is there a leader among the ponies? One who seems more fanatical or perhaps more silent than the others?
Asked Celestia, taking advantage of Chrysalis' silence. Shining took a moment to consider Celestia's question. Actually, I think I've isolated the leader of the squad based on his identity, equipment, and character. If he isn't the leader, he'll be likely a member who holds a key position in the organization.
Then let us speak to him,
said Celestia. Shining Armor nodded and showed the two rulers to one of the cells. Through the shutter in the door, Chrysalis and Celestia saw Pegasus, his hooves chained to the steel chair. He had an overlong mustache, one dashingly curled, now tattered bush of split ends. A graduate of the Canterlot Officer Training School, Corporal Coulthard was the former commander of the 7th Cavalry. He nearly got his entire unit slaughtered by provoking a warband of Blackhoofed Buffalo, and almost caused a war between Equestria and the Buffalo Nations. Celestia growled, surprising Chrysalis with her anger.
I remember that incident. We weren't on the most friendly terms with the Buffalo then, especially with the Blackhoof tribe. Coulthard saw the Buffalo as uncivilized savages, and not only insulted them but ransacked their camp when they refused to comply to his completely unauthorized search demands. Naturally, the Blackhoof tribe were furious and counterattacked, surrounding Coulthard's ponies. What happened after that? Asked
Chrysalis. She had heard of the incident and the result of it, but she was curious to see how the Equestrians had resolved the crisis. If anything, it would give her some insight into how the Equestrian military and Celestia normally addressed cross-species relations. Particularly, what was the pony's attitude to other possibly hostile groups. Celestia allowed herself a wry smile.
At the time, just as a precaution, I had sent my former protege, Hannibal, close the tribal stampeding grounds of the Blackhoof. Wait, General Hannibal was your student?
Asked Chrysalis, interrupting Celestia. The Queen wanted to know as much as possible about the pony coming in to replace Shining Armor's position as base commander. Moreover, the changelings kept profiles of high-ranking and influential equestrians. Hannibal had made it to the collection, and Chrysalis couldn't resist an opportunity to add to that profile.
A former student. With my blessing, she had resigned from her studies and joined the military. She had managed to trick the Buffalo into thinking that half the equestrian army were on her tail and got them to accept the terms for a ceasefire.
Explained Celestia. The Queen arched an eyebrow.
Well, that is something I will certainly be adding to our profile of Hannibal, though you'd probably know that already,
said Chrysalis, making no attempt to hide the bitterness in her voice. Celestia winced and opened her mouth.
Chrysalis,
The Queen raised a perforated hoof, silencing the alicorn.
As much as I am at least slightly thankful of your attempts to make amends, let's return to the topic, shall we?
Asked Chrysalis. The Queen made no attempt to conceal the edge in her tone, but she wasn't angry. On the contrary, Chrysalis found that Celestia and Shining Armor's story of the events in question corroborated what her infiltrators had discovered. That and her recent experiences with Celestia were beginning to add to her new perception of the Equestrian government when it came to interspecies relations. In short, Equestria tended to be quite protective of their ponies, but that protectiveness was matched by their willingness to forge peace with other races. Celestia smiled.
Right. So, from this incident, we can gather that he's probably a racist who is dissatisfied with the army, and by Equestria's handling of the situation. In that case, I suggest that I speak first. I might be able to get through to him first if I can impress him. On the contrary, Princess, I think I can handle this,
said Chrysalis, her lips curling into a wicked grin. But Chrysalis! Before Shining Armor or Celestia could stop the changeling, Chrysalis had unlocked the door and strode into the room. Wasting no time, Celestia and Shining Armor tried to follow the changeling queen in, only to have the door slammed in their faces. Shining Armor gripped the door handle with his magic and pulled with all of his might, but to no avail. Several of Chrysalis' escorting changeling chevaliers, alarmed that their queen had placed herself in such a dangerous position, joined Shining in trying to wrestle the door open, but it didn't work. She locked us out! Get the door ram and the—
Stand down, all of you!
Snapped Celestia, fixing every pony and changeling with a firm glare. Shining Armor stared at Alternia. But your majesty, Chrysalis will tear him to pieces! A changeling chevalier shot a glare at Shining Armor, before turning to Celestia.
We do not care for the pony, but we demand to be beside our queen. Shining Armor, chevaliers, stay calm. If Chrysalis or Coulthard ever became endangered, I will personally smash into that room. For now, though, activate the scrying enchantments for that cell. I want to see what Queen Chrysalis can get out of the prisoner,
said Celestia. The changeling chevaliers looked as if they had just been given a feast and quickly stood down. Shining Armor and the guards' ponies gaped at the merciless gleam in Celestia's eyes, but nodded obediently. Before Shining Armor could trot off, though, Celestia leaned forward, placing her mouth next to his ear.
I know you don't like the Shining Armor, but Chrysalis is not our prisoner. She is the sovereign of another nation, and she has the right to find out why she was attacked. Also,
Celestia sighed.
I Want to trust my sister can keep her promises.
Shining Armor groaned, but gave Alternia an understanding look all the same. I follow you, Your Highness. There was a good chance that the prisoner's blood is probably going to be spilt a bit, because what's a violent and threatening interrogation without it? Anywho, let's get on to our very effective donators. Top donators: TacoCat598, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, and Only One Thing. Zar630, Raiden, Normals, Black Moonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Rollins, Crazy Killer 557, Stu Hex, Will, Omicron Lyre, Chris, Michael Taylor Moore, Dospo, Delta Omega, Jack Hadge, Runescythe 9852, Madman Stan, Lizzie Prickett, Drake Lovedragon, Hunter Norman, Stephen Bingham, Line God 12, Sorcerer Constantine, Hud Zaza, Conver, and many more awesome people. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and live life to the fullest.